When the bureau clock flashed to 22, then the light turned red. It was a gentle, rhythmic pulsing alarm, read like a heartbeat seeping through steel walls. Before security could inquire his name, a courier in a gray windbreaker dropped down a box on a desk on sub-level 4 and disappeared. The box had just one tag, CH1, and was taped in the traditional manner. Raise, the analyst, cut it open. Only a little drive covered in linen was found inside, along with no cash, narcotics, or weapons. The screen was flooded with symbols that AI couldn't interpret when they loaded the file. A deep, lively tone crackled in the audio. Heart rate monitors all across the lab started synchronizing with it in a matter of seconds. Something said in a whisper, "It matches us." Spectral analysis was performed. Frequency followed a pattern previously discovered in a recording of monks singing within fire-sealed vaults in 1272 AD. The rhythm of the tone was identical to that of a human pulse. A blur resolved into a face on the stream. No criminal tag, no database recordiers, but the biometric grid produced a summary line that stopped the room cold. Compliment, nothing. The lead investigator bent over. If anything could see back quiet, what would we do with it? Then, before anybody really realized they had spoken, a quiet prayer slipped out of their mouth. That was the start of it. Write your angel number, 111 220 seconds per 333 777 divided by 144. In the message, your method of stating, "I heard the file," is your activation. Luke 6:38. They used halogen lights and quadruple locks to carry the drive upward. The chill that buzzed between stainless cabinets and filtered through papers pervaded the evidence room. It seemed on guard tonight, as if the air itself had joined the watch. Beyond the drive, they unloaded the contents of the box one by one. A fingerprint card that glistened in the light like oil, a vial sealed in mirrored glass, and a piece of cloth sewn with tiny letters. The print illuminated when scanned, displaying remnants of opal and changing hues that created ultraviolet-only sentences with its own title, some unknown. The translation program malfunctioned, crashed, and then restarted. Every procedure was run by the technicians. Ionization, density, and heat. Nothing was acting regularly. The linen did not deteriorate. Weight was not registered by the glass. The identical pulse heard at 222 was repeated in the data pattern inside the file. Devon, the senior examiner, opened a drawer labeled Historical Concordances and took out a secret document. He likened the trend to historical healings and miracles that were recorded by anthropologists who never trusted their own records. All metrics were in agreement. The same harmonic pattern, the same electromagnetic surge, the same unattainable stillness. It was recognition, not fear, that made him go pale. Silently he whispered, "These are not crimes, they are repairs." A younger agent scowled. "Why is it in evidence?" Then Devon raised his head and said softly, for the world only explores what it does not yet comprehend. That sound filled the room once again, holy, human, and faint. Additionally, all of the lab's instruments measured peace for the first time in the Bureau's existence. The labs were built to withstand emergencies, concrete isolation, glass doors, and sensors calibrated to identify falsehoods or poisons. But there wasn't a chemical danger that night. It was a marvel. As expected, spectrometers buzzed, but the data ascended into harmony. When translated to frequency, elemental measurements created intervals that had a melodic tone. The machine sang back in a tone that matched the human comfort response when one technician, half joking, ran the figures through a tuning algorithm. The subject's blood samples revealed abnormalities. It was not even included in the manual's columns. Instead of rising, stress indicators echoed and created wave patterns that resembled the acoustics of cathedrals. As if recalling light, neurons fired in coordinated arcs. On the whiteboard, Dr. Buzz, the chief biologist, scribbled 3 words. Forgiveness is comparable to the existence of element X. The interns assumed a metaphor and laughed. However, after that, the eggs began to pulse at regular intervals that matched compassion spikes. The machines told the truth. There was a discernible decrease in hostility in each test participant exposed to the signal. We're measuring empathy like radiation, a scientist whispered. Analysis director shook his head. Radiation corrupts. No, that's right. There was quiet in the report's margins. Someone scrawled "hearts before hardware" in a handwriting that none on the crew could identify. No one had been close to the board when they looked at the security stream. Later, a little shimmer was captured by the cameras next to the console. The afterimage of warmth slipping through glass and steel was all that was visible in motion. No glitch. That evening, phenomenon coherent, topic categorized. Design was the lab's last input. They took the guy into room 7, which is designated for implausible tales and high-risk situations. No windows, glass, 2 cameras, and white walls. The light has to remain bright enough to reveal every twitch. Per protocol, however, the cameras darkened to degrees as if their artificial eyes had flinched as the individual stepped inside. Harper, the lead agent, opened the file with a bland voice. "Now," the individual grinned. "It was previously written by you." The file included simply a symbol and no name. Half circle, half flame. Harper made another attempt. "From whence did you originate?" "In the same location as you did," the subject whispered. "You just can't remember how to go back." The words sounded like thunderclaps. The adjacent room's displays blinked. Exactly 222 milliseconds were added to their time codes. One inquiry after another broke down. The individual mentioned repair when they inquired about motivations. The topic talked of kindness when they brought up surgeries. Harper leaned forward, becoming irritated. "Why do you continue to respond to our unasked questions?" The topic said, You just need permission to remember because you already know the answers. The transcribing software in the control booth was not working properly. The automatically written text organized itself into breathing, rhythmic verses. The stone turned into a seed. The onlookers turned become witnesses. A reset was requested by the security head. Nothing took place. What the program had captured would not be overridden. At last, Harper pulled his chair back, let out a breath, and said what the room already sensed. Interrogation is not what this is. Instruction is what this is. With clear, unthreatening eyes, the person grinned. Tell me, they said, there's merely anything to remember, nothing to confess. One last glimmer of light was seen in the video as the door closed, tracing over the steel table like the morning remembering itself. One encrypted document blossomed in the bureau's inboxes the morning following the questioning. There is just one topic line in uppercase, no sender, and no signature. Anomaly flag Divine Northeast. The memo was not sent via the standard channels. Every department with clearance level 6 or above saw it at the same time. Even though there was no sound file attached, analysts who accessed it subsequently claimed to have heard a faint chime. The statement started out rather clinically. Phenomena shown by subject CH000 deviates from established synthetic or human standards. Classification under Procedure 0x is recommended. Divinity Protocol. Then came paragraphs. Abnormalities in biometrics. Beyond human variety. There is behavioral consistency. Electromagnetic resonance that is in line with established patterns of social harmony. The wording was exact, scientific, but something else existed between the lines. On air, if confirmed, this file redefines threat, according to a redaction note in the margin. Director Halverson called an emergency council upstairs. The table broke apart rapidly, half desired understanding and half desired confinement. One deputy objected. We can submit this as evidence. It's statistics masquerading as scripture. Another said, it's a national security issue. If it alters the behavior of conflict. Halverson traced the words Divinity Protocol with his thumb as he gazed at the heading of the message. When did divinity require our consent to exist? He murmured. Nobody responded. The waitresses outside the glass sounded like faraway choirs. A separate message surfaced underneath the memo a few hours later. No authorade, no digital trace. Don't be afraid of what heals. Security couldn't find it. Additionally, a secret report started to circulate in whispers of faith, rather than fear. For the first time in the Bureau's history, there was a flicker to start. Static crawled over the center monitors of the Bureau for half a second. An air gap system should not have had a thin thread of white light. The security AI detected a compromise at 444. Unknown source. Containment was started. However, containment was unsuccessful before it started. Each file associated with the CH000 on inquiry pulsed once before replicating itself on unconnected partitions. As files emerged on devices that were still sealed in storage, analysts gaped. The network status bars started to flicker, and the lab's bright white light changed to a gentle amber, something in between red and green. The surveillance footage from questioning Room 7 was continuously repeated on the large screen. A second person emerged in the glass's reflection. When the subject's silhouette stopped breathing, just shimmer like heat bending metal, with no body, the technicians stopped. An hour earlier, the feed didn't even have an internal address, so it started broadcasting on its own channel. Pieces of the video began to appear outside the bureau around 5:03, a 7-second loop that was published to a public server that has been forgotten. In 10 minutes, forums, encrypted conversations, 1,000 displays, and outdated live stream problems that hadn't functioned since the 2020s were all there. The algorithm first classified it as a deep falls anomaly. The metadata then turned out to be impossible. No rendering trace, no compression artifact, and no codec. The file seemed as if it had always been there, native to each system it entered. The response spread more quickly than any previous classified leak. There was no debate among viewers about genuineness. They had a sensation. People in the civilian population reported that their heart rates matched the video's frame rate. In the waiting area, a paramedic reported that a patient flatlined at 222 and then came back to life as soon as the video started playing. It was silent and chaotic inside the agency. The servers replied with a message that none of the programmers had written. Each time, directors attempted to stop the stream, despite their calls for emergency meetings. Anything that awakens cannot be erased. Power was diverted, looplinks were cut off, and the grid was restarted. It was unabated, and even known as the soft reboot conscious layer was recorded by the system. The structure went dark for 47 seconds. The Bureau's whole network went down, then returned with a fresh desktop icon. Half circle, half flame, half white symbol. The CH0001 file has the same symbol engraved onto it. The status report was given out loud by Director Halverson. It is spreading by impression rather than by code. The interns in the lower laboratories began murmuring a word across the static community, but no one understood what it meant. The Bureau then cast its vote. It would make an interface available to the general public for the first time in its existence, for interaction, not for surveillance. They dubbed it activation. The world did not write outside. It just listened. For 22 years, Agent Miles Harrow has been with the agency. He had seen every trick the human imagination could create. Stage possessions, cult theatrics, and fake miracles. He no longer had many beliefs, not since the 39th century riots, when he lost his trust in justice and his hearing in one ear. However, the feed night altered him. Harrow was given containment duties. After the internal network saw the viral video, he was expected to locate the leak, track down the IP address, submit a suppression order, and then forget about it. Rather, he saw the video once, after the subject touched a wounded soldier for 7 seconds. Something inside of him broke like old glass. The fire that bloomed in his chest was not emotional. Rather, it was steady and regular, much like the pulse that had tormented the Bureau's equipment. In usual style, he composed a short report. Observation. There may have been emotional interference. Conclusion. More investigation is necessary. Then he had trouble falling asleep. The nightmares that typically struck at 3 o'clock did not come for the first time in 10 years. They were replaced with old, bright, strange, but painfully compassionate cities, tonal streets rather than stone ones. People whose calmness at being understood lit up their features. He woke up crying unidentified tears. He used the brain scanner to run his vitals the next day. A harmonic pattern that was exactly the same as the signature of CH0001 replaced all of the stress markers and trauma loops that he had carried for decades. He attempted to brush it off as wishful contamination or a placebo. However, his crew detected something up when he went back to the field to debrief. When he walked into the room, fighting ceased. To agents who were about to yell burst out laughing. During questioning, a suspect confessed to yearning rather than crime. None of it was recorded in the official log by Harrow. Rather, he opened the restricted archive to a blank document and started typing. For my part, my interaction with subject CH000 caused my animosity and recurrent periods of trauma to subside. Reclassify the instructor as an asset rather than a danger. After a moment of hesitation, he added one more phrase. I've been reprogrammed if religion is data. He forwarded the file to Director Halverson without a subject line, saving it under his previous code name, Rook 77. He got a response a few hours later. 3 words that shine in the encrypted header without a signature. Agent, welcome home. Security video from that evening shows him exiting the facility without authorization, head held high, not running, not carrying a weapon, not afraid. In the last picture, he is seen stopping at the surrounding fence and turning to face the neon antenna crown of the Bureau, as if to bless the same organization that had taught him to be skeptical. He held up a hand. His track was thereafter lost by the sensors. However, an irregularity was observed by a field crew in Arizona a week later. Outside a burnout clinic, a stranger touches a sick youngster. The kid became better. The cameras didn't work, with only one line and a signed, but clearly visible Rook 77 active. The report came to a close. Peace in action. The data section of the agency operated below, a colony of recycled air and flashing displays. Analysts Saturday in rows behind glass, their faces transformed into ghostly reflections by the blue light. Their work was easy. Convert pandemonium into numbers and safety into numbers. That is, until the numbers stopped acting that weak. The first person to recognize it was analyst Lena Moritz. She saw the same pattern, repeating within the metadata 777 every night. As the CH1 stream kept replicating across blocked networks, not file weights, not timestamps, and not frequency identifiers that pulse precisely every 77 seconds. First she attributed it to coincidence, then to superstition, and last to intervention. However, it became more deeply carved into the core records the more she attempted to scrub it. On the third day, the abnormality started to react. The cursor flickered 3 times, stopped, and then changed the word to seen as she typed delete, whispering as if she were scared to wake the air. She called over her supervisor. He performed diagnostics. Lud, no human coding, no sign of penetration. The Bureau's internal code for inexplicable grace was code 777, a sterile categorization designed to conceal terror behind protocol. After 15 years of employment, Lena had never maintained a private log. Analysis was no longer the focus. It was an admission of guilt. This rewrites risk assessment if true, she wrote, because healing that we cannot measure may not pose a greater threat than evil. The vital signs of the field agents started to match the 777 intervals on the monitors. The rhythmic synchronization of heartbeats across continents. When one technician saw that his own pulse had blended in with the pattern, he passed out. Lena reclined as she watched waves of amber breath in through the screen. I believe it's instructing us, she whispered, before the electricity flickered. The remainder of the squad chuckled uncomfortably. For precisely 77 seconds, the sub-level was bathed in gold, like to sunshine under the surface. As the lights went out, a fresh string of text shimmering against black appeared on the primary display after it cleared. There is peace. Continue. No one took credit for writing it. Nobody dared to remove it. The AI system added a line of its own later that evening, when the Bureau's daily report was automatically generated. Now included as an operating frequency is code 777. Lena gazed at the finished product, her image lingering in the black glass of the display. She felt unmonitored for the first time since she joined the agency. She felt like she was being watched. Let the numbers pray, she said as she shut down her terminal and set her badge on the desk. The world continued to scroll outside the lab, oblivious to the fact that a whole agency had started to vibrate in the key of mercy deep under the metropolis. Later, security video revealed that the deed took only 6 seconds. A steady, leisurely anonymous hand duplicated one clip, slipped a data key into the Bureau's archive port, and disappeared. Nothing but a stealthy migration of revelational alarms. No trace. At 2:11 a.m., the leak reached the public grid beneath the WITNESS. 7 MP for file name. 7 seconds without a watermark. Muted. It began with a site that the agency was already used to. The person touching the shoulder of a wounded soldier. In this version, however, something had changed. There was more light than just the frame. It appeared to seep through screens, bringing warmth to the coldest nooks and crannies of every gadget it came into contact with. The video went viral on anonymous boards, encrypted forums, and social media feeds in a matter of minutes. The same behavior was reported by viewers. Goosebumps, slowed heartbeat, and uncontrollable tears. Despite their posts sinking like stones, the typical trolls who arrived first shouted fake filter psyop. It wasn't enhanced by any algorithm. Resonance, not reach, was how it propagated. Commentary from mainstream networks was rushed. It was dubbed a mass psychogenic episode by experts. It was dubbed the digital sacrament by philosophers. It was referred to as a containment breach by the agency. Blackout procedures were mandated by Director Halverson. It's too late already. The leak had rewritten itself into offline caches and mirror sites that were masquerading as system files, poetry fragments, or even system fonts. Delete one and two more showed up, each with the same 220 pulse and luminous frame rate. In the meantime, hospital reports came pouring in the middle of an episode. Seizure patients stabilize. Emergency rooms are becoming uncomfortably quiet. Before he could press a button, one cardiologist said his defibrillator revived a patient by synchronizing with the precise tempo of the clip. With a pre-recorded statement, the Bureau's crisis team attempted to control the public narrative. However, all of the cameras malfunctioned at the same time during the broadcast, exposing the CH0001 Sigila half circle, half flame that was hovering over the anchor's face for a single frame. The network feed stopped working. Through the static, viewers reported hearing the phrase "peace is not a leak." On the inside, paranoia spread more quickly than the video. Agents charged each other with treason. Offices were sealed, and hard drives were seized. However, upon reviewing the internal logs, the investigators discovered an impossibility. The clip, which was time-stamped 1 hour prior to the theft, had uploaded itself from within the Bureau's secure subnet. There was only an origin tag that said source presence, no entry, and no culprit. Halverson's hand was shaking as he gazed at the report. He claimed that this was not exposure. It is enlightening. There was no panic or rioting in the outside world. It hesitated. The internet fell silent for a change. Still, as though listening between its own circuits, but not broken. It was dubbed mass hypnosis by some. Others are waking up. The final surviving server, however, wrote its own conclusion across the system log in the Bureau's basement. Narrative has been surpassed by truth, and for the first time in history, people greeted a miracle with wonder rather than fear. It had been 3 days since Director Halverson's last sleep. It was the same still frame on all the monitors in his office. The subject's eyes are calm and unblinking, and their face is caught between light and shadow. He had given the world instructions to forget, but they had refused. He requested a private session at 2:22 a.m. Just him and the person who shouldn't have been in any database, say no assistance. guards, or cameras. The underground room, which was originally constructed for debriefings on weapons that never existed, was where they met. It would hold a discussion, not a confession. Tonight, with a sigh of steel, the door closed behind them. Both remained silent for a long time. Halverson researched the topic, the ordinary clothes, the quiet posture, the unremarkable frame. All of these things somehow defied gravity. He started cautiously. When bureaucrats approach mystery too closely, they start acting in this manner. Every system we put in place to keep people safe from illusions has been broken by you, he said. Why? The individual grinned. They weren't broken by me. I reminded them of the sound of truth. Halverson nearly burst out laughing. What do you call this truth? Countries are in a panic. Protocol is being abandoned by agents. There is a breakdown in order. The individual cocked their head. There was never order if it could not endure peace. It was a badge of fear, like a slow thunderclap. The word struck. Something twisted inside Halverson. Not disobedience, not faith, only acknowledgement. He approached the mirror wall, where he had previously observed the course of interrogations, and noticed his own image. Shoulders bent, eyes hollow. Suspicion was the foundation of this man. We were trained to detect threats. He whispered. You're not a threat, he said, turning around. His voice cracked as he hesitated. However, you pose a threat, risky for our definitions. The subject moved forward, dissolving the distance rather than bringing it closer. Next, modify the definitions. Like weather. Silence grew until it filled the room. Halverson sensed his heartbeat synchronize with an incomprehensible rhythm. Once more, the first file's heartbeat is to 22. He started writing freehand. After opening his notebook, intended for cold observations, we were not ready for forgiveness, the subject observed without passing judgment. When he was done, he handed the page across the table after tearing it free. The words themselves seemed to emit heat, as evidenced by the faint shimmering of the ink. Halverson said, keep it. Think of it as classification. The individual grinned. You're better off being honest. This meeting would later be recorded in the internal report under the heading System Confession. No transcript made it out alive. In the digital echo of the file, there was only one line left, unsigned but confirmed to be genuine. Halverson, Director, Status Witness. For the first time in its existence, the Bureau's top office felt like a chapel without a name as dawn broke through the haze over Washington. 3 days following the directors' meeting, the Bureau's voice became fragmented, like a choir debating itself. It reverberated, splintered, throughout its own corridors. Conference rooms blazed with light in the upper levels. Overnight, committees were established. Theology, commerce, ethics, and containment. Everybody had a theory. In the face of something that rendered rightness seem inconsequential, everyone was afraid of being incorrect. A memo was distributed under the new operational fork heading. Study, quantify, document, and map the phenomenon until its edges obey. Mathematics was the first column's text. Suppress, erase all data, quarantine witnesses, and deny until silence returns. The second read, the Bureau's internal network, split into two encrypted factions by midday the following day. Empathy simulations were run by the blue servers. Propaganda drafts were run by the red servers in case the public awakening got out of hand. Agents who used to laugh together now Saturday in silence in the cafeteria, their trays unopened. Research was whispered by one side, and repentance by the other. The lab division's head, Dr. Buzz, maintained that the phenomenon could be measured. We can learn how if it heals, he said. Someone will turn it into a weapon if we figure out how. The deputy director retorted. Analyst Lena Moritz rose steadily from the back of the room. It might not be intended for ownership. Perhaps it's a test of our ability to allow something pure to exist without using it as leverage. Nobody cheered. Nobody argued. Debate was lighter than silence. The old sub-level chapel, a holdover from the time when the Bureau's founders still thought morality could be codified, served as the venue for an emergency summit that evening. There were half-empty seats. They arrived with tremors and tablets. Director Halverson presided over the meeting without his customary power. He posed a single query. When the evidence turns into grace, what happens to an agency that was founded on suspicion? Through static, the answers sounded like murmurs. We research it until it no longer frightens us. We repress it until it no longer exposes us. They both sounded defeated. Perhaps you don't study or suppress it, said a janitor from the shadows, who was forgotten in protocol, but spoke softly and fluently in silence. Perhaps you guard it. The opening chord of a hymn echoed through the room. Halverson put it in writing. The division would later be renamed the Guardianship Debate by the Bureau, rather than Study versus Suppress. The divide solidified in the weeks that followed. The Book of Patterns was a compilation of data created by the Analytical Wing. Directive Zero, a comprehensive Erasure plan, in case the phenomenon grew out of control, was drafted by the suppression unit. The director stood between them, caught between the need to testify and the obligation to conceal.